Modern day video games, modern day video games are a massive undertaking, and they're only getting bigger. Now, that might be great if you're the player, but if you're on the development side, that can be really stressful, especially if you're from a group of marginalized developers. So now this next speaker is going to break down why we need to stop trying to be heroes and make more sustainable games. Shanae is a producer, author, and speaker with over 17 years of experience in the industry. She's worked on the Devil May Cry series, Outer Worlds, and with the Microsoft HoloLens technology, and she also volunteers on IGDA's Women's Steering Committee and Black in Gaming. All right, eyes, ears, and all you love for Shanae.
It's 2003, and I'm sitting in an interview for a job, a game job, my first game job. There's a panel of 3 interviewers, and we're wrapping up, it seems. Oh, one last question, he starts. How much overtime is too much overtime? And me, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, young and innocent, and oh so excited to get my foot in the door, I answered reflexively, I don't know, 24/7? Good answer, they smirked. And it worked. Finally, my chance to make games. All it would cost me was all my waking hours. Remember life before game dev? What you imagined it would be like? Artists and engineers, designers, all working together to create the next innovation in game software. The next Mario, the next Halo, the next Destiny. This was your destiny, a dream fulfilled. But then you work your first 10 to 10, or a 10 to 12, or you release your first game to very critical reception. These first few months or years in game dev, we want to get that feeling back. We feel like game dev should always feel like that, when sometimes it just feels like you're trapped in some kind of YouTube prank video. And I should know, because over the years, I've had many an adventure. The stories I could tell you, the tales of testing during hurricanes and fires, 36-hour days in the office, of refusing to fall asleep at my desk only to almost fall asleep in my car, or when working at EA Sports got me out of a speeding ticket. Strange but true. I told and retold these stories so many times over before realizing that sometimes it was more than just a funny story. But it can take distance and experience and many, many years to gain the perspective to recognize these patterns. But once you see it, you can't unsee it. And you can't unsee how those patterns define our industry. Hi, my name is Shana T Bryant. I'm a senior producer. I've been making games and game-like things for going on 18 years. I've shipped big stuff and small stuff. Some games you'd know, like those up there on the slide. Some you probably wouldn't remember, and across a wide variety of platforms and publishers. And I've worked at a bunch of places, including Capcom, Midway, EA, Xbox, and Crystal Dynamics. In addition to the day job, I'm a contributing author with a few books under my belt, a member of the IGDA Women in Game Steering Committee and the Black in Gaming Leadership and Incubation Teams. I also write an indie comic called Terrible Allies. Check it out. It's pretty great for being so terrible. And after almost 2 decades, do you know what I want most for our industry? What I want most is actually something I don't want. Heroes. No more heroes. This talk is called No More Heroes, but it's not just about how heroics in game dev is killing us. It's about how to stop it from killing us. Because game dev can be awesome, but it can also be hard as hell. It can be fulfilling, but also sobering. It can be fun, but also exhausting. We're sort of an industry of these dueling intention. And when the awesome, fun, fulfilling clashes with the hard, sobering, exhausting, it can mean game over for a game dev career. The game industry has a problem, and we all know the first step to solving a problem, right? Admitting you have a problem. Yes, that's right. So let's talk about some of those big problems. So when I said the game industry is killing us, what does that mean by killing us? Why the assertion? Well, let's quickly settle the premise of whether games is killing us, literally or figuratively, and let's tackle it with data. See, every year, the Game Developers Conference releases its State of the Industry survey, where it collates data voluntarily collected from thousands of game devs. They cover everything from what platforms we're all developing on, PC, to how we're doing with diversity efforts, not great. But then they always ask about quality of life, and stop me if any of this doesn't sound familiar. Now, picture your average game developer. Your average game developer, or AGD for short, has been in the industry for somewhere between 3 and 6 years. Put in terms of AAA game development, that's maybe a game and a half. And this is what gets me, that same average game developer will leave the industry before they hit the 10-year mark. This is not leaving a job or a manager or a particular studio. It's leaving the industry. For some, that'll be a whole career change. Anecdotally, it was just around the 10-year mark that I and many of my friends and colleagues found ourselves at that same crossroads. Do we continue or do we call it? Some of my friends called it. One went to manage a bar. One opened a bike shop. Another became a real estate agent, and a fairly successful one at that. And many, many more went on to non-games tech, where they often reported better pay and more manageable hours. But back to that State of the Industry report. Their conclusion is this. This data, it reinforces our understanding of game development as an industry driven by young workers who tend to depart within a decade. Depart within a decade from our dream job? But if making games is our dream job, why are people leaving? What's killing us? So I put that question out there to my social channels. I said, hey, if you're no longer in game dev, what made you leave? And I got a flurry of responses, but very few surprises. Some felt they weren't valued, some left managers, but many sought a pay, stability, and balance they felt they couldn't find in games. Oh, and many cited a boys' club culture and the micro and macro aggressions that pushed them out. More on that later. So let's solve this murder mystery. If people are leaving their dream job, there's got to be a reason why. So let's ask ourselves why, and who, and what, and how. Then let's decide, what are we going to do about it? Because this can't be an industry where dreams go to die. Let's start with who. Because the who is simple, right? Like, it's game developers, it's all of us. But it's worth reminding that what affects the majority can have a disproportionate impact on people already underrepresented, further marginalizing the already marginalized. Meaning, if your average cis-het white guy gets pushed out of games in less than 10 years, what do you think that means for Black and brown folks, POC, women, LGBTQIA, disabled people, or anyone at the intersections of any of those identities? Only 1/3 of all developers stick around for 10 years or more. Those are harsh odds. Now let's talk about what's killing us. And buckle up, this is not going to be pretty. So remember that flurry of replies that I got from former game devs explaining the former part? Well, it looks overwhelming, but the more answers I got, the more patterns emerged. Pay, stability, hours, culture, quality of life. People leave for a whole bunch of complicated reasons and for a few very simple ones. Most of the replies I got could be neatly bucketed into a handful of categories: exclusion, instability, and abuse. Now let's dig into these. Exclusion. And don't read exclusion like exclusive, like a exclusive club or a console exclusive. No, exclusion takes many forms, and in this case, none of them are good. There's the incidental exclusion, where team building events for our previously all-male team always featured guns, fishing, or strip clubs, but I guess we can't do those now because we've got women teammates. Or there's accidental exclusion, where the one disabled manager doesn't get invited to after-work events like bowling because of a series of assumptions. There are cultural practices that we're loath to give up, like long hours, nights and weekends, or joking about how no one's gotten enough sleep, which is both true and reinforces how it's okay to not get enough sleep. There are unconscious biases that infect everything from who we are, who we hire, to who we mentor, to who we promote. For context of the exclusion problems that we're still fighting, EA Spouse happened 16 years ago. And if you don't know who or what EA Spouse is, well, that's just a reinforcement of the lost memory of an industry with far too few elders. Now, instability. This was probably the most common reason given as to why developers leave by far. Most of us are entering the industry. We want to make a career of it. We want to grow and learn and earn and succeed. But as a business, game development can be fickle. I remember clearly a lunch conversation with colleagues who were talking about all the failed studios they'd worked for. When I commented at the time, not only had I not been laid off, I'd been employed for 12 years straight, there was shock at the table. There oohs and ahs. That studio went on to lay off almost half of us, not 6 months later, breaking my 12-year streak. We reward unhealthy behavior. We cheer the team member who pulls the all-nighter and fixes the gnarliest bugs. Never mind, it was probably a lack of sleep that made some of those bugs to begin with. And we reinforce that messaging with every attaboy, every joke, every on-the-spot bonus that says it's okay to throw away health and well-being for an industry that sometimes can't guarantee us a job in 6 months. We leave behind a lot for this industry: mental and physical health, relationships, family time, sometimes our peace of mind. These wounds turn into old scars, and we wear our scars like a badge of honor when we really know that they're the remnants of our deferred dreams. And then we turn around and expect the exact same from every new recruit who walks through the door. Earn your scars and stripes just like we did, or else how can I know that you love games like I do? And yes, for no one who's asking, that is a Star Trek reference right there. And lastly, let's talk about the elephant in, let's say, the china shop: abuse. This industry is far from immune. We've seen very high-profile instances of abuse in games hitting the news over the last few years and in recent weeks. When it comes to the isms and phobias, the problem isn't new. But just because it didn't start with games doesn't mean it isn't our problem to solve. It's not enough to claim to be an ally. We have enough allies and not nearly enough cookies for them all. An old manager probably thought himself an ally too, but when I alerted him to a known abuser whose name and company appeared on our upcoming meeting agenda, his response was to uninvite all the women from that meeting. That's not allyship. That's enabling. And enablers are more akin to abusers than allies. The microaggressions, the abusive cultures, the lack of a clearly articulatable strategy when it comes to diversity or inclusion, these are all symptoms of a deeply rooted cultural cancer that we need to treat seriously. All of these pieces combine to a truly unpleasant Voltron of critical stressors. And those stressors hasten along not only the burnout of individuals, but the burnout of entire microgenerations of game developers. But even these might be survivable if it weren't for the final piece of the puzzle: denial. Remember when we said the first step to solving a problem is admitting we have a problem? Well, we don't think we have a problem. We don't believe we need to change. And therein lies the most vicious rub. See, game devs who are faced with this ill cocktail of exclusion, abuse, and instability, they know they're fighting a truly uphill battle. But once they've pushed the rock up the hill so many times, many can find themselves looking for that door marked exit. So now once we understand the who and the what, the how becomes apparent. Through a cycle that can include discouragement of criticism, gaslighting, retaliation, folks can be left feeling isolated, alone, and just a little bit crazy. The cycle itself is self-perpetuating because all the best or worst problematic systems are. And the result is further marginalization and critical burnout. And finally, the why. The why is largely because, well, change is hard and risky. And if things are kind of sort of working kind of sort of fine, like why mess with it, right? Like if people leave, maybe they just didn't have what it takes to be here. I mean, there's a long line of folks who can't wait to make games. Why change for people who don't want to be here? But what if we treat our culture problems like we treat our game design problems? By building on the success and expertise of those who came before us, by establishing goals and guidelines and understanding what good looks like. But first, we have to admit we have a problem. So let's talk now about what we can do individually and collectively to change our fortunes and start solving these problems. First up is recognizing patterns to address exclusion. Exclusion often happens where bias meets routine. We assume that Terry is just one of the PR girls, so we don't invite her to the developer lunch at E3. Oh, don't invite Deshaun to poker night. He probably doesn't have reliable transportation across town anyway. Or my personal favorite is when people assume that all women devs must be junior, and then I get to regale them with tales of making games they grew up with. It's not just a matter of breaking the routine, though. It's educating yourself to recognize the patterns of exclusion: team events, hiring and promotions, project assignments, and just general camaraderie. We are so used to excluding that sometimes we do it without thinking. Leaders, likewise, we need to recognize patterns not only in ourselves, but at the studio level. Set standards and values to which we hold ourselves accountable and our leadership and our teams accountable. Because if you don't set your studio values, if you don't design your culture, it will design itself. And these organic cultures are typically hostile to marginalized groups. Next up, seek accountability and work honestly to address instability. Instability is a difficult problem to solve because it in itself is not a problem, but a result of dozens of other problems, big and small, all adding up to the sum total of what is known as instability. But there are some steps we can take as individuals and as leaders to combat instability in its common forms. Individuals, be on the lookout for the warning signs and symptoms of instability. High attrition and low morale are signal flares, especially when attrition is at the management level. But instability is typically a studio level issue, so now let's talk to our leaders. Leaders, your teams need you, and they also need accountability, trust, communication, and planning. We have to honestly engage in how instability impacts our employees and devastates historic knowledge. We can't promise a world without reorgs, but we can operate in a good faith with our teams and put plans in place to mitigate troubled times. Next up, let's talk about boundaries to address abuse. Boundaries are important not only at work, but in life. We set all kinds of boundaries for ourselves. We set budgets for our spending. We set curfews for our kids. We set alarms for when to wake up in the morning or when to go to bed at night. So why is it so hard to set boundaries for our game careers? Maybe it's because we fought so hard to get here and we're afraid our dreams are as fragile as we remember them to be. I know setting boundaries is hard and maintaining them can feel scary, but setting boundaries will help you understand what you're willing to accept. It will help you establish where you do your best work and when you have to compromise. Because some individual boundaries can be malleable. You can choose to bend the budget for that Steam sale, or maybe move a curfew for a special event, or stay up a little bit later to finish off that Deep Space Nine marathon. Don't judge. But always bend in moderation, because if you bend too much, they break. And if you find yourself repeatedly bending your boundaries, it might be time to reevaluate them. And now for leaders, develop boundaries around both the people and the project. Games are a business, we know that. But they're a business fueled by the creativity of people. If we lose that creativity because it's exhausted or stressed or just plain burnt out, we all lose. And then remember, leaders don't break boundaries. They are meant to set a standard for a team and build from that a culture for a studio. For creative endeavors like games, it's so easy to bend a little here and bend a little there. But if you bend your leadership boundaries, you break them. And lastly, make the boundaries known. Your boundaries inform your values and vice versa. It doesn't help to have a secret set of rules against which the team and studio are judged. Game development isn't like a video game, and invisible boundaries are no boundaries at all. So these are not easy problems to solve by any means, but it's important for us to talk about what we need to change if we're ever to change it. The solutions I've laid out here are just a few steps down a very long, windy road. So let's stop denying and let's start moving. Now, to recap, 2/3 of game developers will leave their dream job within 10 years. This is in part due to critical stressors which contribute to the burnout of these entire microgenerations of game developers. Critical stressors include exclusion, instability, abuse, and denial. These are big problems, but we do have the power to change this. First, to address exclusion. Recognize patterns, educate yourself about what exclusion looks like and when it happens, and break that routine. Next, to address instability, learn the warning signs of instability. Managers, communicate with your teams, trust them, and mitigate with planning and accountability. Then to address abuse, set boundaries. Managers should set studio boundaries and respect their team members' boundaries. Make sure boundaries are well understood through the team and through leadership. Lastly, to address denial. We have a problem, but now that we've defined some of those problems, we can start making real progress against enacting solutions. It comes down to this in our industry. We can't keep making the same mistakes. We need the talent and ideas married to experience to reach the next level of what this industry can be. And we can't do that if we're constantly hitting the reset button on our institutional knowledge. We know what we need to do. So let's go out there and save a game hero's life today. Thank you so much. Stay safe and game on.
Thank you so much, Shanae, for that look at the industry. And, what's really, I think most players are really removed from that side of everything because, we just get the game and then, it's kind of easy for us to just play and kind of think that, it's just like machines just spitting these things out. But, there's a really human element to all of this. And while I know that we all want the latest and greatest and biggest games, it should not come at the expense of, the well-being of the people who create them. So very much appreciate everything that you shared with us today.
Thank you.
Awesome. For those of you watching, if you want to make sure that you or your friends who are developers or just developers in general are treated better, make sure that you comment, share, like, speak your voice and let it be known that, yes, you want to be able to play the latest and greatest, but, developers are humans too. All right. Keep it locked in, and we'll see you in a bit.